It's 6 a.m., cold. The clock on the nightstand glows in the dark. By the door, a pair of running shoes sit untouched, laces still tied from last time. Someone lies in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Not asleep, not moving, just stuck. There's a weight sitting on their chest that has nothing to do with blankets. It's heavier than tiredness. It's the feeling of having zero motivation and knowing it. Every self-help book on the shelf promises the same fairy tale. Push through the hard part, and one day it'll click. The habit will run on autopilot. You won't have to think about it anymore. You'll just do it. Except the data says something different. For most people, chasing real, meaningful change, that autopilot moment never comes. And the ones who keep waiting for it eventually give up, convinced something is wrong with them. So here's the question nobody answers honestly. If elite performers, if the most consistent people you know, aren't running on some magical reserve of discipline, what are they actually running on? This video isn't going to tell you to want it more. We're going deep into behavioral science, neurobiology, and cognitive psychology to show you how the most consistent people on Earth have quietly removed motivation from the equation entirely, and how you can too. Chapter 1. What is happening? The symptom. You're sitting on the edge of your bed, gym clothes folded on the chair, or maybe you're at your desk, staring at a blank document, cursor blinking. The air in the room feels thick, like moving through water. Standing up, typing the first word, it feels physically impossible. Your hand drifts to your phone. You pick it up, you start scrolling. Not because you want to, because it's easier than facing the thing you're avoiding. Just a small hit of relief. And underneath it, a quiet voice says something cruel. I just don't have the discipline today. Why does this seem so easy for everyone else? So you put the phone down, pull the blanket back over your shoulders, and make a deal with yourself. I'll skip today. I'll make up for it tomorrow. For a second, it feels like relief. Then it curdles into something heavier, a low hum of self-loathing you can't quite shake. Days become weeks. The gym membership sits unused. The project stays half-finished on your desktop. And slowly, without ever deciding to, you start believing something dangerous. That you're just an inconsistent person. That this is who you are. Here's the belief most of us are carrying without even questioning it. Force yourself to repeat something for 21 days, and your brain will magically flip a switch. It'll become automatic, effortless. You've probably heard some version of this in a TED Talk, dressed up with a science-backed number like 66 days instead. It's a myth, both versions. Philippa Lally's landmark 2010 study at University College London tracked motivated volunteers attempting to form simple daily habits over 84 days. More than half of the participants completely failed to establish the expected automaticity curve, even under ideal paid conditions. And for something meaningful, something complex, like exercise, the modeled timeline to hit a plateau averaged 91 days, with some participants projected to take up to 254 days, nearly 3/4 of a year, to automate the behavior. Picture an hourglass, but instead of sand, it's filled with thick, slow molasses. Every grain drags. That's what building a real habit actually feels like, not the crisp, satisfying countdown we were promised. So here's the shift. Stop waiting for it to feel effortless. For anything that actually matters, showing up on purpose, using real conscious effort, isn't a phase you push through. It might just be the permanent cost of doing something meaningful. And there's a strange kind of relief buried in Lally's data too. Missing a day doesn't break anything. Missing a single opportunity to perform your routine has essentially zero material impact on long-term habit formation. Your consistency levels recover immediately on the next repetition. You're not one skipped gym session away from failure. You never were. But if the habit never becomes truly automatic, if we're always fighting some baseline resistance, what is that resistance exactly? What's actually happening inside your brain in the moment you freeze? To answer that, we need to look at the biology of friction itself. Chapter 2. Why is it happening? The mechanism. It's 4:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. You're at your desk. There's a deadline breathing down your neck, but your brain feels hollowed out, like an engine trying to run with no oil in it. Your eyes glaze over the screen. You reach for coffee or sugar, anything to chemically jumpstart your own brain back into focus. My battery is dead, you tell yourself. I've made too many decisions today. I don't have anything left. So you close the laptop. Tell yourself tomorrow morning. Fresh start. You spend the evening half watching something, half scrolling, while a low static of anxiety hums in the background because the task never actually went anywhere, and because you only ever seem to move when motivation spikes or panic sets in, a pattern forms. You start living deadline to deadline, cramming, stressed. Producing work you know isn't your best, but it's the only mode you've got. The belief underneath all of this is the ego depletion model, the idea that willpower is a physical fuel tank in your brain, and every decision you make throughout the day drains it a little more, until eventually there's nothing left. Here's the twist. That battery might not exist at all. If you shift your mindset to believe willpower is unlimited, your brain does not suffer a drop in cognitive performance. That feeling of being drained isn't your fuel running out. It's an attentional shift from have-to obligations to want-to instant gratification. Your brain isn't empty. It's just changed what it wants to pay attention to. Picture a high-voltage power line, trying to arc electricity across a massive, empty chasm. That's what your brain is attempting every time it tries to force a huge, heavy task through a state of zero motivation. No wonder it fails. The gap is just too wide for the voltage you've got. So stop trying to generate more voltage. Stop trying to hype yourself up into caring. Instead, shrink the gap. If motivation is sitting at zero, the only way action still happens is if the effort required is basically nothing. This is exactly what B.J. Fogg discovered at Stanford with his behavior model. Behavior only occurs when motivation, ability, and a prompt converge. And the relationship is a trade-off. When motivation falls to zero, a prompt will only trigger behavior if ability is scaled up to the absolute maximum, meaning the task is made so simple it requires virtually zero cognitive or physical effort. So here's the small shift. When motivation dies, don't try to do the whole thing. Shrink it down to a 30-second version. Not go work out for 45 minutes. Just put on your shoes. That's it. That's the whole task. If you've been nodding along thinking, okay, but this is exactly the mental spiral I go through every single week, this is usually the point where people either close the tab and forget everything they just heard, or they actually decide to change something. If you're the second kind, stick around because it gets more interesting from here. Shrinking the task gets you past that first wall of inertia, but that doesn't explain why the same wall keeps rebuilding itself, day after day, even when you know the trick. Why does the cycle of starting and stopping keep repeating? For that, we have to go deeper, into the actual structure of your brain. Chapter 3. Why does this pattern keep repeating? Identity. It's a rainy Saturday afternoon. You're on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, surrounded by clutter you promised yourself you'd deal with this weekend. Your phone is in your hand, but you're not really looking at it. You're just floating in a thick fog of apathy. Your eyes land on the sink, a stack of dishes. You feel a small wave of resistance rise up in your chest, and you look away, pulling the blanket tighter, like it's a shield. I'm just a lazy person, you think. This is my personality. Some people are wired for discipline. I'm clearly not one of them. So the whole weekend disappears into passive avoidance. And every hour you spend like that quietly reinforces the story. I'm someone who can't keep it together. This is what's sometimes called the inactivity loop. Every time you withdraw from something effortful, you deprive your nervous system of the active engagement it needs. Your energy baseline drops a little further, your motivation erodes a little more, and the loop gets easier to fall into next time. The belief we're all raised on is that motivation has to come first. You wait to feel like doing something before you actually do it. But it's backwards. Action is actually the cause of motivation, not the effect. And here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. Forcing yourself to engage in tasks that cause active emotional resistance is one of the only ways to physically grow your brain's self-control networks. Picture a small, walnut-shaped region deep in your brain, glowing faint blue. This is the anterior mid-cingulate cortex, your brain's actual hub of tenacity. And every time you force yourself through something uncomfortable, that region visibly thickens, like a muscle under tension. That's not a metaphor for effect. It's literally what's happening. Neuroimaging research on the anterior mid-cingulate cortex reveals that this region integrates cognitive control, autonomic regulation, and reward processing. It's larger in athletes and superagers who stay sharp well into old age, and physically shrunken in people struggling with depression and apathy. And crucially, it's highly neuroplastic. It grows in volume when you force yourself into behaviors you actively resist, and shrinks when you avoid them. So, stop treating internal resistance as a red light. Start treating it like a weight in a gym. Every micro suck, The cold shower you don't want, the stairs instead of the elevator, the one dish you clean immediately instead of leaving it, isn't just a small chore. It's a rep. And reps build the muscle that decides who you become. We've broken the inactivity loop. We've found a way to physically train the brain's resilience. But strength alone doesn't solve the exhaustion of fighting yourself every single morning. What happens when you don't want to spend willpower on this ever again? That's where the real breakthrough is, and it has almost nothing to do with your mindset. Chapter 4. How do you permanently change it? The system. It's 7 a.m. Someone walks into their kitchen. The coffee maker starts to drip. And without a single second of internal debate, no negotiation, no pep talk, no dragging themselves, their hand opens a journal and writes the first sentence. There was no window of hesitation for the excuses to creep in. The body was already moving before the mind had time to argue. What they feel isn't a rush of willpower. It's calm, almost boring. No dramatic battle against apathy, no white-knuckle discipline, just motion. And by the time they're fully awake, the hardest task of the day is already done, which sends a small wave of momentum through everything else they do. Months pass like this, not through heroic effort, but through something closer to gliding. Health, career, creative projects, all moving forward, almost entirely independent of how they happen to feel on any given day. We tend to assume consistent people have some superhuman reserve of discipline, that they're constantly fighting and winning every single day through sheer force of will. They're not. Consistent people simply pass the control of their behavior onto the environment, so they don't have to think about it at all. They're not more disciplined, they're better architects. Picture a train sliding onto a set of steel tracks. The train doesn't steer, it doesn't choose a direction, it doesn't burn energy deciding where to go. The tracks do that work for it. That's what a well-designed environment does to a behavior. It removes the decision entirely. The move is this: stop deciding things in the moment. Pre-decide the exact when, where, and how, so far in advance that your brain executes the plan like a reflex, without ever consulting your mood. This is Peter Gollwitzer's research on implementation intentions, if-then plans. In his famous Christmas essay study, university students with identical good intentions were asked to write an essay during their break. Those who didn't specify when and where they'd write it had a dismal 32% success rate. But those who wrote a specific if-then plan hit a 71% success rate, more than double from one sentence of planning. And the effect gets even more dramatic with harder behaviors. Trials on vigorous exercise showed motivational interventions alone achieved only 39% compliance, while adding an if-then plan pushed that number to 91%. Even patients with severely compromised conscious control were able to initiate actions faster than healthy people, simply by delegating the trigger to an environmental cue. So here's your small shift. Write your target behavior as a rigid, specific script, not "I'll exercise more." Something closer to, the moment I set my coffee cup down on the counter, I open my laptop and write one sentence. A single, exact trigger, tied to a single, exact action. By shrinking the task to remove friction, by letting resistance train your brain instead of scaring you off, and by hard-coding your cues directly into your environment, you quietly dismantle your entire dependence on motivation. Not through more willpower, through better design. We're back in that cold bedroom. 6 a.m. The shoes are still sitting by the door, but this time the camera doesn't linger on hesitation. It watches a foot slide into a shoe before the mind even has time to form a complaint. The internal war that used to happen every single morning, it's just gone. Consistency was never about feeling aligned. It was never about waking up inspired, or being some kind of disciplined warrior, or waiting for an autopilot switch to flip on its own. Motivation is weather, unpredictable, temporary, completely out of your control. But systems, cues, and the wiring of your own brain, that's physics. Predictable, buildable. You are not a passenger waiting for the perfect emotional storm to arrive before your life changes. You are the architect of your environment, and quietly, one rep at a time, the sculptor of your own brain's hardware. So stop waiting to feel like the person you want to become. Start designing the environment that forces you to act like them.